This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. Star Trek Resurgence is the perfect example of a quality title that is currently flying under the radar. As a fan of many of the older and classic Star Trek shows, the game feels like a nice mixture of a choice-based, narratively driven experience, mixed with those Trek shows. If you are tired of many of the new Trek shows not being faithful or honestly good, except for Season 3 of Picard, that was great, then this might be a title to check out. Plus, to my surprise, I felt like the entire experience, at least so far, felt like a Telltale game. So I looked up the developer, and many of the same people that worked at Telltale worked on this game. So if you like those types of games and have been missing that company since they went under, again, this might be for you. Today, let's dive into Star Trek Resurgence. So let's touch on some of the gameplay that you'll be seeing. Mechanically, much of the game feels like a series of mini-games. You might need to fix the transporter and line up some things on a map, or you are piloting a shuttle trying to get to some points to drop off beacons. Others are more action-oriented where you use your phaser. Whether you are flying or even just fixing parts of the ship, these mini-games are enjoyable enough to engage the player with some gameplay as the story plays out. For example, when you get to first pilot the shuttle, it's mostly just there to give the player something to do as the story continues, and you make dialogue choices as well during this part. Most of the stuff is rather simple, but it never becomes annoying or a chore. Then there's these parts where you are walking around a space, interacting with objects, or just trying to solve some small puzzles.
The captain will be right down to meet you, sir.
In that case, I will wait for him here.
The most involved aspect of the gameplay comes down to your choices. All of these decisions are timed, so you need to take in the information you are getting, and then pick the one that you think is best. There's a lot of urgency with each of these moments. Now, even early on, you have to make some choices that will reflect how the crew will initially see you. What I really liked about this is that it's a nice mix of that urgency from a Telltale choice, while also including elements that you would see in a Star Trek show. For example, in one of the first parts, you need to make a choice, but before you do, different members of your crew are giving you reasons and options why their way might be the better way to go. This very much calls back to where the crew members in a show would sit down and discuss a problem that they needed to solve. This is done really well and showed how to interweave the Telltale formula with Star Trek. An interesting aspect of the narrative is how you'll be controlling two different characters on the same ship, Jara the new XO and Carter the engineering officer. As you make choices, you will see how the other crew members react to you, and you develop a rapport with each of them. Both characters are introduced well, and so far are ones that I'm rooting for. I do like the decision to have the player assume the roles of different people in different positions on the ship. It gives the player appreciated perspective changes depending on who you are controlling.
The USS Enterprise D, under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, discovered a Takan outpost in the Delphi Ardus. According to the mission summary, an unbreakable energy-draining field was deployed against...
Now, without diving too much into spoilers, there are some nice touches that the narrative does that I appreciated so far. So as I said before, I do like how there are intense choice-based moments with collaboration from the crew. At the same time, there are very enjoyable moments where the crew members are just sitting around a table, discussing the main problem and issue they face in the game. We get to hear different points of view, along with being able to participate in it as well. This is right out of the show, and I loved it. There is one moment that kind of feels like a self-insert, but in a good way. Carter sort of fanboys out when he meets Spock, and this comes across more as sweet and funny without it being cringy. It felt like the writers were really happy to be making a story that featured this iconic character, and they wanted to have that moment. Something else I want to point out too is that there is plenty of excitement and action here, but there's also a lot of focus on just talking and discussing with different characters. Again, another thing that was found in the classic shows. I found myself getting involved in these parts starts just as much with the action. I'm not done with the game yet, but so far this is honestly great. Now as far as flaws go, it mostly comes down to stability and presentation things. For example, there are parts where either lines are cut off too soon, or a word or line is repeated twice. Stuff like this sticks out more because the entire experience is riding on this story, and while they are noticeable, they haven't really been a detriment to the game. Hopefully this is something that can be improved with more patches. At the same time, the subtitles are not consistent, and will just not show up for many sentences.
Hey Diaz, have you seen a hyperspace? I last saw it near the shuttle, Ptarmigan.
I'll let you know.
The Telltale games were ones that I found to be generally reliable, narratively focused experiences. The gameplay mechanics were simple and interactive enough to keep the player interested, but what really provided that hook that sucked you in were the stories and especially the choices the player could make. The choices as the main form of gameplay is what made you think, was this the right move? I wonder how it would turn out if I did the other option. Or did I side with the wrong person? It made you wonder and gave the player that sense of ownership in the story of how it played out. Sure, most of the time it was the illusion of choice, because to make a game that could account for many different variations would be extremely tough to make. But in those moments where you are timed on what you need to do, if the illusion is presented well with a story you are invested in, along with characters we care about, then at the time we are fully in that moment and captured by it. So when Telltale eventually went under, it was a sad moment in the games industry. Some of us saw that it might be coming because they were getting involved with a lot of properties, and there was an argument that Telltale was oversaturating themselves at the same time. I didn't love all of their games, but like many, I got started with The Walking Dead and enjoyed many of their other titles, like the first Tales from the Borderlands, The Wolf Among Us, and a few others. So now with them kinda making their comeback with it looks like for this year, many of their former developers are making new experiences similar to what we enjoyed before. So far, Star Trek Resurgence is a gem of a title. It presents what I enjoyed about the Telltale games, along with being a new piece of Star Trek that is actually really good. The new shows generally haven't been doing it for me. When it comes to the Star Trek shows, I'm a big fan of the shows from Enterprise and back. Season 3 of Picard seemed like an anomaly because of how good and respectful it was. Now this game feels like an extra special treat for someone who grew up watching many of these shows with my father. If this entire experience turns out to be solid, Resurgence will easily be one of the most underrated and especially overlooked titles of 2023. Many people do not even know that this came out. When I saw footage of it floating around Twitter, I thought it was related to Star Trek Online, and was pleasantly surprised to see that it wasn't. There's a lot of care and respect put into this game and the writing for the universe, and you can tell that the people that made it actually cared about the property. I plan on reporting back once I finish it. Have you played Star Trek Resurgence? Are you a fan of the shows? Let me know down in the comments below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.